would like to start off by apologizing for the fact that I had to mute the background music for all the gameplay footage in this review to avoid a copyright claim. Unfortunately, the music in Mirror's Edge is an instant DMCA claim, and while this review qualifies as fair use, I don't feel like fighting that claim. My apologies on this because the music is such an important part of the game experience and really helps add to the atmosphere. I had to put some of my own poorly made music in the background just to have some extra noise. It's not great, but it's the best I can do considering the circumstances. On Christmas Day 1997, my brother and I received Tomb Raider 2 as a present. We ended up getting to the Opera House and then got stumped on a puzzle and couldn't figure out what to do next, so we did what most gamers who had access to gaming magazines that regularly published cheat codes did. We put in the level skip code. In fact, we level skipped for our entire first run through the game. That is until you get to this level where you start out underwater and have no means of putting in the level skip until you find the entrance to the sunken ship where you can find solid ground to then input the dancing level skip code. So yeah, I cheated to get through the game the first time, finally unlocking the infinite ammo for all guns you receive upon beating the game. Sometime later though, I do remember going back to play this game and I said, let me just choose a level in the game and see if I can figure it out on my own, which I then proceeded to do. I would eventually skip 2 random levels in the game and play through them legitimately, and eventually came to the realization that the game wasn't actually impossible, and that it can actually be beaten without cheating. I ended up playing through the game the right way, beating it on my own, having played through multiple levels previously on their own. It always seemed that no matter what I was playing on the PS1 or even later the PS2, I would always find myself coming back to Tomb Raider 2. It became my comfort game, that one you always come back to play no matter what. For a while there, I would put in yearly runs of either Tomb Raider 2 or the original Tomb Raider. I bring up Tomb Raider 2 here because Mirror's Edge became my 7th gen Tomb Raider 2, that comfort game that I would constantly find myself coming back to play through again and again, or just skipping to my favorite levels in order to replay them. I've talked in a couple of my past reviews how I was burning out of modern gaming in the 7th console generation. So many games were these same repackaged designs over and over again. Innovation had started to stifle, and entire genres of games practically disappeared or were pushed down to just being downloadable games only. The mainstream popular games just became a repeating cycle of the same thing, but shinier. Most of the games shared the exact same overdone set pieces, just shuffled in different order in each game. Mainstream gaming just became boring and predictable to me. It also didn't help that this is around the time I started my first YouTube channel, and was starting to showcase and play retro and even PS2, which was still alive at the time I started YouTube, games, causing me to further explore into my PS2 library of 200 games at that time. In truth, to me, the 7th gen just couldn't compare to the libraries of the PS1 and PS2 and my retro gaming interests at the time. I just started to ignore the modern mainstream games and delve deeper into the niche style games in the libraries of past systems I owned, finding those underrated gems to play and to inform others about. I was first introduced to Mirror's Edge by one of the editors at GamePro.com. I remember first seeing the trailer and being very impressed by what I saw. I had never seen anything quite like it. It was refreshing to finally see a fresh idea in a generation that was already swimming in bland shooter clones. I guess technically Breakdown did some similar things before Mirror's Edge, but even though I already owned Breakdown on the Xbox at the time, I had still yet to play into it. I still haven't, despite starting the game like 5 times over the years. So Mirror's Edge, combining its fresh looking gameplay, unique art direction, and incredible music in that trailer, definitely piqued my interest. In a generation of Halo Duty of War, a Mirror's Edge was a much needed breath of fresh air. I don't fully remember when I picked up the Xbox 360 version of Mirror's Edge, but I do remember that when I finally got the game, I played through my first playthrough on normal, then I played it again on hard, and then I went back and played through it on easy. I did 3 back-to-back playthroughs, which for me in the 7th gen was nearly unheard of. I also later picked up the game for the PS3, just to have a reason to play through it yet again. The PS3 version plays well and looks maybe a little worse in the shadowing than the 360 version, and has more screen tearing. I only noticed one area where it stuttered a lot when I was playing the game in 1080p. If you go into the system settings and manually turn off 720p and 1080i as display options, the PS3 will run the game in 1080p. Otherwise, the game will just run in 720p instead. For this review, I am playing most of this footage through the Xbox One's backwards compatibility for its improved frame rate, even though sometimes it does have visual glitches, and there'll be some PS3 footage thrown in here and there. I did my first playthrough on normal with the music on so I could enjoy the game as it was meant to be played, but for my recorded run I played on hard with the music muted. muted. Without the music, the game isn't quite the same experience, as the music adds to the ambiance of the game, as does the unique art style. The whole game from an audio and visual design standpoint was as unique as its first-person parkour concept. Some people at the time said Mirror's Edge stole Portal's art direction, and I guess I can see what they meant to an extent. Both games had a unique art direction, fresh gameplay design, and some of the best theme songs of all time, both of which are named Still Alive. In a sea of Halo Duty of War clones, be a Portal or Mirror's Edge. Both games are also rather short in length, but left a lasting impression on gamers that continues to this day. These are two 7th gen classics that should be played by every gamer at least once in their lives. Mirror's Edge takes place in the near future, where an unnamed city has become a dystopian nightmare. A totalitarian regime aided by a military surveillance state has taken control over the city. Basic freedoms are gone, and those who first resisted these changes have since given up or given in to the city's masters. All information is controlled by those in charge, leaving the only avenue for those clients looking to share information with others being the use of runners to deliver that information. Information that would instantly be smothered by the despots in charge of the city were it to go through the normal channels. The runners run along the tops of buildings using parkour to deliver outlawed messages or data from one client to the next. The runners are the last line of resistance against the totalitarians in control. The game centers around Faith, a runner who quickly gets pulled into a quest to clear her sister's name and uncover details of a mysterious project named Icarus. The story unfolds through in-game cutscenes and through cartoon sequences that are reminiscent of those old eSurance commercials. From 1996 when Tomb Raider hit till 2008 when Mirror's Edge hit, great strides had been made in third-person action-adventure games to smooth out the clunky mechanics of early 3D adventure games into smooth-playing 3D games. As technology increased and games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, Uncharted, and even the Crystal Dynamics Tomb Raider reboot series released, developers had expanded on that foundation of the original Tomb Raider series from a methodical, formulaic control design style into simplified and fluid-feeling experiences. Years of refinements to the genre and 2 console generation jumps in technology had vastly improved upon the formula. However, when it came to first-person games using similar mechanics, there were some games that added some action-adventure elements, like the ability to pull yourself up to a higher ledge, but these mechanics oftentimes felt clunky to use, and you could play through the entire game without even using them or realizing they were even a gameplay mechanic at all. As some people at the time put it, Mirror's Edge plays a lot like a first-person Prince of Persia, taking gameplay mechanics previously associated with third-person action-adventure games and smoothly transitioning them to work in a first-person adventure game. It combines the smooth climbing and wall-running mechanics of a Prince of Persia game with a more limited combat system than something like Breakdown, and even added some optional first-person shooter elements. The game is linear in nature, and due to the speed Faith can travel most environments, short, taking maybe 4 hours to beat all 9 levels in the game if you watch all these story sequences. There are pursuit portions of the level where Faith is being pursued and fired upon by the police, the puzzle scenes where Faith must make her way to the exit through a developer-designed obstacle course, and even some action sequences where Faith's route is blocked by the police, and the player is required to successfully take them out to progress. Some levels have different variations of these scenes as well. There's actually quite a bit of variety in the level designs. I'm happy to report that there are no forced stealth scenes in this game, which were so common in that generation. There are times where you can choose to be stealthy, but the only punishment for not is alerting the trigger-happy guards. As of making this video, Mirror's Edge is 15 years old, and its gameplay and design are still fresh feeling. It's just one of those evergreen designed games. The smooth-moving parkour elements of motion mixed with levels that are designed to take advantage of Faith's entire repertoire of moves, to the storytelling mechanics, surprise ambushes by police forcing you to run from pursuers at a moment's notice, or getting new instructions radioed into you at a moment's notice to keep you on your toes, keep you moving forward, sometimes in the frantic panic of being pursued, or in quiet times where the game is slowed down as you traverse a carefully designed puzzle section. There will be tons of excitement for a while and then a period of peace. Sometimes Faith is being pursued, other times she's pursuing someone else. The pacing and design in the game are excellent. I really enjoyed the well thought out puzzle sections of the game, and the action scenes are also well thought out, always keeping you on your toes. There are some action scenes that are kind of frustrating and will lead to a lot of deaths and retries until you figure out how to beat them. However, once you learn your favorite path, these scenes become a lot easier to traverse in future playthroughs. Overall, the gameplay is engrossing and fun, and thanks to the thoughtful level design designs takes the parkour concept beyond just being some gimmick. It's so well implemented and ingrained in the design of the game that Mirror's Edge became its own unique experience that was only ever duplicated in feel by its sequel that took 8 years to finally hit the market. It's similar to Portal in that it's kind of in its own class of gaming, a subgenre that exists only to itself and its sequel. Truly a unique experience even to this day, as the concept never really took off, but some of the gameplay mechanics did. I'm not one to get into abstract concepts when it comes to games. I mostly just focus on the gameplay over everything else. However, aside from some really refreshing gameplay mechanics that open the door to new possibilities of movement and motion in first-person games, Mirror's Edge is also a piece of artwork in motion. From the color-based visual design where you can tell the developers took a lot of time carefully choosing the color schemes in each level, to the music in the game actually adding to the atmosphere. This game really is a piece of artwork in motion. And this is coming from someone who usually rolls their eyes when the topic of video games as art comes up. There was just something about the audio-visual design of this game that would capture my imagination and draw me into it even more. I remember going back to my favorite levels to listen to the music and take it slow to take in the scenery. I would look up the soundtrack on YouTube and even remixes of the soundtrack, and I would listen to them for hours. It's one of those games that had external effects on me that went beyond the gameplay. Mirror's Edge became that game that if I didn't know what else to play at the time, I would pop into my Xbox 360 and play through it again. Its art direction and music drew me into it as much as the gameplay did. Visually, I say it's still one of the most striking Unreal 3 engine games out there. As I've already said, Mirror's Edge successfully combined third-person action-adventure gameplay with first-person elements. There are first-person shooter elements in the game if you choose to engage in them. However, discovering the achievement of not firing a single round throughout the entire playthrough changed the way I play through this game. Once I achieved that achievement, every subsequent playthrough I played, I did it without firing a single round, except for the one round you're required to fire in the story. Faith is equipped with the ability to disarm the police she comes in direct contact with. If you hit the disarm button when the firearm turns red as they attempt to strike you at close range, you disarm the officers. Once disarmed, the player can then use the firearm against the other officers, or you can just hit the disarm button to drop it. As the game progresses, disarms get harder depending on the officer. For example, the SWAT guys are much harder to time the disarm on. That's where the ability to slow time comes in handy, an ability I completely forgot existed in my recorded playthrough, so I had to go back and record the footage you are seeing right here. Slowing things down makes disarms a lot easier to time. I can't believe I forgot about this mechanic. I would say it's probably the only gameplay mechanic you can forget to use. Even with the ability to slow time, I still always had trouble timing the disarms, so I found that I would rather just cheese my way through by fighting the guards. Go for a low kick, punch them at standing, and maybe throw a jump kick at the end. For the SWAT guys, just go for the low kick whenever you can. I found this to be more effective for me than timing those disarms. I didn't choose a no bullet run for recording this footage, partially because I forgot about the ability to slow time, making disarms really hard to time, especially with the frame rate boost of the backwards compatible version I'm playing. Those attacks are coming at me faster. While playing through this game again, I made it about halfway and I decided to just start using the firearms. I put capturing footage above being flashy just for this review. Plus, the police in the game are so trigger happy they make it so hard to not want to kill them. It's like, bro, it's for your own good. I am trying not to kill you. And then they shoot you and you're just like, okay, you're dead. I also realized that some of the gameplay habits I have in this game were from playing the game repeatedly with a no bullet run. The places in the tough areas I would hide and the routes I would normally take. That being said, due to the fast motion nature of the game, most enemies can just be avoided by running past them. I'm more of a gamer with the tendency to want to beat up or fight every enemy in the game I can, which is why I'm terrible at most retro games, by the way. But since Faith is a goner in 2 or 3 hits, this tendency of mine makes the game more difficult. There are scenes where you will have to stay and fight, but the majority of the game is a lot easier if you just go into speedrun mode and run from the threats. In fact, one of the extra modes is called speedrun mode, as well as a time attack mode. There is no multiplayer in the game, which for the 7th gen was rare. The only DLC included was a time trial mode that challenged players to complete obstacle courses in a certain amount of time, and I'm not big on time trial mode, so I never cared to buy the DLC. Plus, I never really bought DLC anyways. Another cool visual aesthetic in the game is the runner vision, which guides the player where to go next by highlighting jumps and pipes in red. Runner vision is available on the easy and normal modes, but hard mode shuts it off, meaning you might want to play the game on a lower difficulty setting first. That way you have a better idea of where to go. The runner vision can add to the linear feel of the game, even if you don't actually have to follow it all the time to get to the area you're trying to get to, meaning there is some openness to the game. The biggest complaint that can be waged against the game is that it's too short and too linear in nature. Most people who played it back in the day probably rented it from Blockbuster, beat it once or twice over a weekend, and called it good. In the early part of the 7th gen, single-player only games were seen as a huge step back. This was the new digital age, and people wanted online functionality in their games. Mirror's Edge was short, fairly linear, and had no online play. It took those gamers who still enjoyed single-player games to really appreciate this game. Early 7th gen attitudes from a lot of gamers I interacted with at the time was that it seemed like a waste of $60 to buy a traditional single-player game unless it was something open world in nature. Even BioShock 2, the sequel to one of the most incredibly popular single-player only games of that generation, tacked on an online mode. Eventually, developers and gamers did come back around to single-player experiences after they all realized that if it wasn't Call of Duty, no one was going to play it online anyways. But for a while there, short, single-player games were looked down upon as an archaic idea. This was the new digital age. No online mode meant it was a waste of money to a lot of gamers at the time. As I said earlier, this game can be beaten in about 4 hours, but for those like me who proceeded to play through it multiple times, getting hours upon hours of play out of it, the game was worth the price of admission. I was capable of putting in almost perfect runs in some of the levels at one time. I never got speed running good at the game, but I played through it probably over a dozen times, if not more, and in a generation of gaming where I was rapidly losing interest in most modern games, that was incredibly rare for me. By comparison, I've only actually played through the original BioShock, which was another 7th gen title that I loved, one full time, with a few second runs saved on the PS3 and the remastered version on the PC. I loved BioShock, and screw you guys, I even really enjoyed BioShock 2 as well. Sure, it wasn't as good as the original, but I've seen recent YouTube videos where people overstate it as being a bad game, which I completely disagree with. It's still got that addictive BioShock design. Controlling Faith is a smooth affair. Once you get accustomed to the various maneuvers at your disposal, pulling them off in a slick, fashionable manner becomes second nature. The game starts out with a training mode to play, but you can skip the training in the pause menu, and you can jump straight into the action if you choose to do so. The controls feel fast and fluid, and all the maneuvers are easy to learn and easy to pull off. It won't take long until you find ways to show off and find alternative routes through the levels using the tools given you. Really, the only big hiccup in the controls has to do with something that I mentioned in my Tomb Raider review, and that has to do with the sometimes hit or miss nature of the game automatically grabbing ledges, pipes, or even pulling off the wall run. Sometimes you'll jump for a pipe and it's right there, yet you watch helplessly as Faith, for whatever reason, won't grab the pipe as she falls to her death. Now, it could just be the way I play the game, but in playing through this game again, I remembered certain jumps that always gave me trouble when playing through the game because Faith either wouldn't grab the pipe like she was supposed to, or wouldn't wall run when she was supposed to. I remember always having to slow down and take certain jumps in the game more cautiously, because the automatic functions of the controls would feel really spotty at certain times. The system usually works pretty well, but there are still jumps that are infamous to me because of the spottiness of the controls. Mirror's Edge Catalyst would later smooth out the control issues and even improve the combat system. I bought Catalyst either late 2022 or early 2023, I can't remember, and while I was kind of expecting to hate the game, surprisingly I've really enjoyed the 7 hours of the game I've played so far. I bought the game on a Steam sale, and when I saw it on sale I decided to look up reviews for the game because I'd barely heard anything about Catalyst, making me suspect that it wasn't good. I watched the IGN review of the game, and I decided to take the plunge. I'm not a fan of having to launch the Steam version of the game through a separate EA Games launcher that wants to run at startup. I totally blocked it from doing so. I don't even run Steam at startup. I get drawn into the game every time I boot it up though. I like Catalyst a lot, surprisingly. I remember remember one time when playing the original Mirror's Edge thinking, if they ever make a sequel to this game, it should be in a large open city. And it appears that DICE agreed with me. As an avid fan of the original who expected disappointment, Catalyst is good. I think it's kind of silly that they decided to just reboot the story and start off from a new beginning instead of making a sequel to the original. But I like the smoother controls, some of the basic moves you have to unlock in the skill tree now, and the expanded and improved combat system. I will say this, the IGN video completely missed the fact that the game actually wants you to use your momentum in combat to do higher damage attacks on enemies. I was watching them run straight at an enemy trying to dodge fire instead of doing a wall run to gain momentum, then launching off into an attack off that wall run for an instant knockout on the enemy like you're supposed to. I guess this aspect of the combat completely went over their heads when they reviewed it. My only minor complaint about Catalyst so far, outside of the fact that the music isn't nearly as impactful, is the fact that all the side missions just break down into being time trial races where you have to deliver a package in a certain amount of time. As I said, I'm not really big on time trials. However, if you are, consider this a plus. I saw the Xbox One version of Catalyst at my local Walmart on clearance for $9, and for that price, it's a good buy. Just don't expect the online servers to be up when you play it, as between the last time I played this game and when I went to play this footage, EA already shut those servers down. Nothing new when it comes to EA though. The bottom line, Mirror's Edge was my comfort game of the 7th generation. That game I always found myself coming back to play again. On its own merits, it's still a wonderfully unique, well-designed experience that I highly recommend to anyone who has never played it or who hasn't played it in a long time. It's a very short game, but one that has left a lasting impression on me personally. And not just me alone, as there are still tons of fans of this game out there. From the audio, visual designs, and the innovative gameplay design, it still stands in a class of its own. Outside of its sequel, there really still isn't anything like it today. This game was an artistic achievement on DICE's part, which is perhaps the biggest surprise about the game, being that it came from EA's Battlefield developer. If you've never played it, you should. If you have fond memories of playing it, hunt it down and play it again. It was released on the Xbox 360, PS3, physically on the PC, and is available on Steam normally for $20 when it's not on sale. Find it in whatever version you can. It's definitely worth playing.
Don't you read the news?
It's not news anymore. It's advertising.